I can, and I can advance them.
Nice.
All right,
Magic.
so I'll jump right in then. So thank you, Zorian. I appreciate the opportunity to join you today and share my thoughts and experience regarding strategy and execution. For the audience, over the next 15, 20 minutes or so, I'm going to share the following four things. An overview of key decisions that leaders must make to build a valuable company. And you see them here, people, strategy, execution, and cash. I'll then give an introduction to the relationship between strategy and execution, and then get into a little more detail into each area, including some examples. And then lastly, I'll provide just a short summary before I hand the reins back over to Zorian. So today we'll focus on strategy and execution, but it's important to recognize that these are just two of several important areas to focus on as a leadership team when growing your business. The other areas are people and cash. So let's touch on people first. Hiring, retaining, and growing the right people, putting them in the right seats, and having them do the right things is essential to building and maintaining a thriving business. According to recent Mayflower and Gallup studies, the average engagement rate of employees in the US hovers around 30%, with a little less than half of your team actively disengaged. So this means that most of your team is there just for the paycheck, and some are actively affecting your business in a negative fashion. So people obviously is an important thing, but not something we're going to focus on today. The other area is cash. Cash is really unique because it's the only area of your financials that won't lie to you. Either you have cash or you don't have cash. So focusing on the areas where you can find cash within your business is important. You can certainly go outside your business. The cost of capital is relatively low these days, but as we all know, that's not the only cost of capital. There's influence, there's control, etc. So cash is another area that's important. But we're going to focus today on strategy and execution. So there's a popular saying that says that to be successful, you have to get everyone on the same page. But first, you have to have the page to get everyone on. And this is a famous saying of Vern Harnish, who wrote the book Scaling Up. He's created what he calls the one-page strategic plan, or OPSP, and it primarily focuses, as you can see here, on strategy and execution, and that's where we're going to kick off. So on the OPSP, as we look from left to right, we see highlighted here the two key areas of strategy and execution. And first, in what's green on my screen, but maybe different colors on your screen, but if you look at sort of column 1 and 2 on the far left, it's the who you are and why your company exists, or known as your core purpose, your reason for being beyond profit, and your core values, your closely held beliefs, the rules that you live by within the organization. And they're foundational to any company strategy. In the next column, we see in column 3, the company's longer term thinking, 3 to 5 years out. And then as we move further to the right and change colors to blue on my screen, you're looking at more actionable timeframes as we move from the 1-year execution plan in column 4 to shorter timeframes and actions for the quarters in columns 5, 6, and 7. Some of my clients actually extend this further out to months and even weeks, creating what we call the 13-week race. And I think that's important for some folks that may have less discipline or haven't quite formed the habit. Doing it week by week helps to create and form those habits. So these areas work together and they make an elegant documentation of your company's business plan, allowing you to connect what you're doing in the quarter out to the year and beyond to your purpose and longer term goals, as well as what you need to do today and this week to move you closer to reaching those goals. Let's use a standard circular model to emphasize how strategy and execution are linked together in a never-ending loop. The think, plan, act, learn loop that you see here. Simon Sinek loves to talk about business being an infinite game, a never-ending loop, if you will, and I think he's right. Companies that plan and make decisions as if they're going to last forever will outlast most, if not all, the competitors they have, but also have an attractive and highly valued a company from an acquisition standpoint. So even if you don't last forever, you'll still probably get a higher valuation if you do get purchased. Sort of like buying a fixer-upper or a house that's ready to move in. You're always going to pay more for a house that's ready to move in. So let's start with the top of the circle, the think portion. And then this is really where strategy starts. One of the most important and ongoing meetings for long-term sustainable growth is what Jim Collins calls the CEO Weekly Council meeting. It's a handful of senior leaders and possibly an outside advisor who discusses one or two strategic ideas each week and do not dwell or get into operational or execution ideas. Strategy should be primarily focused on thinking. The doing is where you do the execution part. So these strategic ideas and discussions come directly from two unique Gazelles tools, the Strengths, Weaknesses, and Trends tools, or we call the SWET tool, which is different from SWOT, which most people know. It's very important, but used differently. The SWET really has you think more out into the future. What are the trends that are happening that we have to think about? What are our inherent strengths and weaknesses that we have to either leverage or work around? We also use what's called the 7 strata of strategy tool. It walks you through your team through specific and important areas to consider when crafting a differentiating strategy. They have tools in it like the words you own. So if you were to have people type in Google and want your company to come up, what would those words be? Sandbox, which is where you're going to play. Is it going to be in a certain region? Is it going to be in the country? Is it going to be in the world? And other things like brand promises and guarantees, which we'll get into a little bit later. So that's the think stage. And then there's the plan stage of the cycle, and it's more accurately termed execution planning, which includes a broader group of senior and middle leaders of the company. And its purpose is to plan and execute operationally the strategy laid out by the senior leaders. The tools that are most applicable here are the one-page strategic plan mentioned earlier, and also specifically the annual and quarterly plans. And then what you do, of course, is you learn from that. And then you take that information as you execute the strategy and you learn what's going well and what's not going well. You apply it back to your strategy, and then you have this never-ending loop of think, plan, act, and learn. So let's get a little bit deeper into the difference between strategic thinking and execution planning. While it seems like a fine line, I believe there's a fundamental and meaningful difference between strategic thinking and execution planning. Many companies call it a strategic planning process, which is fine as a name, but I believe when you separate the two in practice, that's where you find the magic in that separation. By freeing yourself from figuring out how to make it happen, your strategy can be focused on your strengths, your customers' needs, what you enjoy doing, and what you want to accomplish. This freedom also allows you to envision a future for your business, and it's with that vision that you are, in many cases, inevitably able to find a way to make it happen. As you can see, the strategic planning process is provided by a small set of senior leaders, in this case 3 to 5 leaders. Please note, though, that anyone in the organization can and should provide input into the strategic thinking process. This is sort of an example of wisdom of the crowd. But the final decision is made by a few who've collected the important insights from customers and team members. As we move to execution planning versus strategic thinking, you have to begin to figure out what you need to do to make that strategy a reality. You may have to create or improve key processes in your business. You may have decided to create new functions within the company. You also may need to emphasize certain areas of your business and de-emphasize others. This is where you create a plan. You communicate that plan, and then you execute that plan rigorously and relentlessly. This process happens every year, every quarter, every month, every week, and every day in many cases. All right, and one last highlight of the difference between the two in terms of a visual. What I like to do is think about in the long term first, because if you're going to have a strategy of how you're going to get from A to B, you really have to understand where B is, and that's really your longer term planning. So starting from the far right, the long term plan, this is where your purpose and your core values that we talked about earlier. There's also something called BHAG, which is a Jim Collins phrase, which stands for Big, Hairy, Audacious Goal. Other people call it your North Star or your beacon, whatever you want to call it, but it's really having an idea of where you want to end up. And then you move closer to something that seems more closer to reality, where the long-term plan might be 10, even 20 or 30 years out. You move to 3 to 5 years, where we have the SWET that we talked about. You really focus on your customer, your brand promise, and we call the one-phrase strategy. which I'll get to a little bit in a minute when I go deeper into strategy. And then as you move left, the colors change from blue to brown, you're looking at the year, your annual planning process, which many companies do. And this is where your SWOT comes into place. We call them initiatives in Gazelles. I know Zorian will have some other terms as well. They're all sort of the same thing. They're, what are we going to accomplish in the year? What are the few things that we really need to get done to grow this year? Then of course you're going to set your goals and then your KPIs, which are your measurements to do that. And then you move to quarterly with your priorities or OKRs, your KPIs, your quarterly themes. And then of course, whenever you have any sort of goal that you're setting, it's really important to have rewards and recognition. People love to be part of a process to grow a business, but they also want to be recognized for their contribution in their effort. And as you can see, it moves all the way down to today, right? It's great to have a weight loss plan. We all know how to lose weight, right? Less calories consumed than you actually release or get rid of. But you also have to make sure that, what am I going to do today, right? I'll just eat one less thing today, and that will get me closer. The same thing with execution planning. You've got to get people down to today or this week. So transitioning now to more depth into strategy, just a reminder that strategy and execution are inextricably linked. It's a never-ending process of thinking, planning, acting, and learning. So we'll start this process and dive a little bit deeper into your strategy for 2018. One of the best known folks in strategy is Michael Porter. And he likes to talk about strategy as a creation of a unique and valuable position involving a different set of activities. And this is really important. Really focusing on that word differentiation is key. Because one of the first things you want to think about is what type of strategy are we aiming for? And I believe that fundamentally most strategies start from either one or another point of view. Either you're going to be a low-cost provider, and that's where your strategy is going to come from. You'll figure out how to do that, such as a Walmart or a Southwest or a McDonald's. Or what I call a joy-to-use provider, such as an Apple, a Nest, a Dyson, or a Starbucks, where you're getting a premium price for what you produce. Some are able to combine the two, but it's rare and usually involves a more complex branding strategy. So the low-cost version doesn't dilute the brand of the joy-to-use version. So I strongly believe that since the human brain likes to compare and contrast when making decisions, this quote by Michael Porter is really important, because you have to show a clear reason or set of reasons to be the right solution for your set of core customers. They'll flock to you, making selling and marketing a lot easier. So for me, a strategy that allows you to be better and different is best, but different is better than better. So let me say that again, because that's sort of confusing. A strategy that's better and different is usually the best strategy, because it allows a clear understanding for your customers that you are a superior producer and you're a different solution. Think Southwest, right? Flying a plane is relatively ubiquitous, but we fly Southwest for certain reasons. We don't want to pay a lot of money. We know that we have to put up with some things, but we understand that when it's a low-cost thing that we're looking for, we're going to go on Southwest. But if you can't be better than someone, being different is also a differentiator. Give someone a different option for them. In Gazelles, we like to have a compelling question or two for each of the 4 decisions, as I mentioned: people, strategy, execution, and cash. So for strategy, we ask these 2 questions. Can you state your company's strategy simply? And is that strategy driving sustainable growth? So let me give you a little test, which obviously I won't be able to check up on you, but whose strategy do you believe is wheels up? Whose is flat packed furniture? I'm sure most of you figured out these pretty quickly, because these 2 companies have really differentiated themselves. So everyone from senior management to frontline team members of Southwest and IKEA know their simply stated strategy, which is something I find with my clients. Not everyone knows the strategy. Actually, not even everyone in the senior leadership team can state the strategy in a similar fashion. This helps them to focus what they do every day and how to realize how they can move the company forward, improve areas that strengthen that strategy in the company. So if for your core customer, you focus on how to make their lives easier and better by providing them exactly what they're looking for no more, no less, you can be like a Southwest or an IKEA or some of the others that grow their business predictably for decades in some cases. Southwest has been a darling of the Dow Jones for 40-something years. They've been profitable since the early mid-70s, actually. So let's talk a little bit about Southwest as an example. So Southwest strategy, as I mentioned earlier, is wheels up. It shows that they are, it's clear to them that when they have planes in the air, they're actually making money. In fact, profit per plane is one of their key metrics. They know exactly how much profit per plane when they put it in the air. So that's why they emphasize quick turnaround and offer fewer quote-unquote luxuries than other airlines. That's why they fly one aircraft and reject the hub and spoke model of most other airlines, doing point-to-point to secondary airports because they know their gate fees are less there, so they can keep their prices low. They have this unique boarding process that we're all this ABC model that we know about, and that list goes on and on. However, it's also why they hire great people who love and to serve and entertain the clients, the customers, the people who board the airplane. Because they know they put them through some hoops to save them money, so they want to make it a fun experience for them when they're on the plane itself. So with that example of a well thought out strategy sort of rolling around in your heads, I'm going to move on to execution. So execution is really about bottom line. So this is about profit. This is about squeezing as much profit out of your business as possible, where strategy is more about top line revenue, driving customers to your product or service. And most of you, if not all of you, are familiar with the 80-20 rule. You get 80% of the results from a system or community statistically, driven by 20% of the contributors' efforts, also known more accurately as the Pareto principle, named after Italian economist Vilfredo Pareto, who's mentioned, who's you can see here. So a key principle in that Pareto principle teaches us to carefully choose what priorities to focus on and allocate the right resources to get the job done efficiently and effectively. A similar approach comes from a book called The One Thing. That author asks, what is the one thing we can do such that by doing it, everything else will be easier or unnecessary? And this is focused on your employees and or your customers. These two similar methods provide us some insight into the two keys to excellent execution, which really are focus and discipline. So the compelling question for execution is, are your processes running effectively and driving industry-leading profitability? We also like to talk about in Gazelles is it actually, are they being done without drama? As you know, there's sometimes too much drama in business. If so, that's great. If not, then you should ask yourself the question, why not? What can we do differently to do that? And a quick reminder to further separate strategy and execution, as I mentioned before, you really want to focus execution about driving bottom line profit. So if you're a low-cost provider, you're trying to find ways to satisfy your customers as much as you can, but remove costs from the system. For something like Southwest, they basically force us into this cattle model to board the plane, and they don't really give us a lot of food options, etc., because they're trying to remove costs from the system, which is, even though they're low cost, because they have driven costs out of the system, their profit is good as well. Or again, where strategy is more about sort of driving revenue. And as I talked about earlier, it's really focus and discipline that are important. And these are three areas around execution that we call the three disciplines in Gazelles. And you have to master these in order to become an execution machine. You now have a well thought out differentiating strategy as your guide. And to reach your destination faster, you have to master these. And these are OKRs, or quarterly priorities, and Zorian will go more into OKRs in a little bit. And this is really about alignment and focus of the team and the business. Metrics are about clarity. Obviously, if you don't measure it, you can't improve it. And then lastly, meeting rhythms. You have to communicate the information, and you have to get feedback from your team members and from your customers, as well as they need to get information from you and transfer that DNA of the leadership team as well. So before I move on, I want to tie this all together. So the combination of strategy and execution also has an impact on the other two areas that I mentioned earlier, people and cash. When you have well-aligned teams with clarity and you're moving better and faster, your people are happier and they're more fulfilled, and you're actually getting more production out of them. And in many cases, you need fewer employees to produce more. And then cash, obviously, if you're driving bottom line profit and you're managing cash well, you have more of it to help support your growth of your business. So let's get a little bit into the key performance indicators or the metrics. So these are the areas where you use to measure and predict your progress. Obviously, you can have lots of different names, KPIs, OKRs, whatever they might be, but really having the numbers to do it are important. They are sometimes specific to an organization or a task, but often there are many companies that use it just within the industry itself, and they measure themselves in the industry. One area that's often missed in KPIs is the balancing process, which is the third bullet there. You want to balance leading and lagging, and people and productivity, for example. A lot of companies that do metrics usually have just a lagging indicator, so something like sales, versus a leading indicator, which might be webinars or a certain lead source that actually drive most of your sales. That way, when you have both sets, you can course correct well in advance of missing your goals. And unfortunately, I've worked at many companies where we'd be in a meeting and we just missed the goal and we had to fix something, and it may have taken us weeks or months to fix it. If we had been looking back as to what was causing that ahead of time and had those metrics in place, we may have been able to correct it sooner. Also important is to balance people and productivity. When you grow your business, you're likely burdening your team more and more. You have more customers, more calls, whatever it might be. So you have to keep an eye on the folks who are providing the service or shipping the product or doing whatever else it is to fulfill or implement what you've sold. So you don't want to take you want to take good care of them, and you don't want to take them for granted or burn them out, especially your A players. It's really important to make sure that you take care of your A players in your business. So let's just give a few examples of OKRs or KPIs. As you can see, leading and lagging here. There's the three types: leading and lagging, people and productivity, and strategic and tactical. And as you can see, some leading indicators are qualified leads or a 90-day cash runway or an NPS score for your employees, where you measure how happy they are. Lagging, of course, is revenue bookings or monthly cash balance or an A-player retention rate. People and productivity are, on the people side, NPS, and when you measure your customers, your employee satisfaction or shareholder ROI. On the productivity side, it's revenue per full-time equivalent, or FTE. Maybe your labor efficiency ratio or your inventory turns if you've got inventory. And then, of course, there's strategic and tactical. Your profit per X. As I mentioned, Southwest has profit per plane. You know, what is your profit per X of your business? If you focused on one metric in your business that drives most of the profit, what is that? Could be your market share or your gross margin. Then tactical is, you know, customer calls per day or hours per unit shipped or deliveries per hour. So I recommend when you have KPIs, and I'm sure Zorian will talk about this as well, you can have tons of KPIs. I have a list of 560 possible KPIs, which is just, you know, incredible. You should never have that many. Usually I recommend about 3 to 5 that should be visible to everyone that is impacted by them or has influence over them. So imagine watching or participating in a sporting event where you had no idea what the score was. It just wouldn't be as interesting to watch, right? Or be part of. It's important to have a visible scoreboard for everyone to see. It provides motivation, direction, and satisfaction to the team. In one of my companies, where we were an email hosting company in the mid-2000s, before Gmail or Office 365 were big, we knew that we were in the customer service business. So we measured how our customers felt about us. And this was before NPS was really came into its own. So we just asked them how we were doing on a scale of 1 to 5. And we put that thermometer up on the wall so everyone could see it. And they could walk by and we could track our progress. We actually got to 4.6 out of 5 eventually, which was about a 92% approval rate from our folks, and it was really a motivator for the team. So the next thing you want to focus on after you have your priorities set, what are the few things that we want to do, and how are we going to measure how we're doing with them? It's really meeting around that and really focusing on the communication rhythm that we have to make sure that we're keeping up on our metrics and we're meeting our goals well before we have that. And there are a handful of different meetings to have. And I know that the accepted wisdom is that people hate meetings, but I would argue that people hate boring meetings. If they're fast-paced and action-packed like a hockey game, then it's more interesting. It's more fun. You're actually getting things done. People like to get things done. Unfortunately, I've been many of these myself. It's more like a hushed game of golf. Watching that, it's slow moving. Sorry to your avid golfers out there. What you want to do is make sure that you have a series of meetings that promote that process and drive you forward every day, every week, every month. Because they provide a platform to review and check in on the progress of your priorities and metrics. And they help to form excellent habits that will help heal relationships in the business and actually accelerate the company forward. I've also heard from many folks in the Gazelles organization that the daily huddle alone has transformed their organization. So let me go a little bit into each. So let's start with the bottom, actually, which is annual, or the strategy. This is where you're really tying your strategy to your annual planning. Typically, who is there is your executive and management team. And in many cases, it's a 2-day or maybe even sometimes a 3-day offsite meeting where you get out of the office and away from the distractions, really focused on what you want to accomplish this year. And then, of course, you break that down into pieces, which then is the quarterly, where you're reviewing your OKR goals attainment, et cetera. You're putting your quarterly priorities in place, which are a subset of your annual priorities, and you're sort of doing a business review of how you did last quarter and what you can learn from that. Again, executive and the management team to do this, and typically a half to full day for this meeting. And the next is your monthly meeting, which is an all hands meeting. And many folks have this where you sort of transfer your DNA and you learn from what you did, and you solve maybe 1 or 2 really big issues with everyone there. And that's maybe 1 or 2 hours total. Then you have the weekly executive team meeting, which is pretty much the most popular meeting out there. And this is generally a more tactical meeting where you're getting together, you're collaborating and aligning. It's typically about an hour, maybe 90 minutes in some cases. What I've seen in this case is it always starts off with good intentions, but in many cases it devolves into a status meeting where you're just reading your weekly report, which you've already written and given to everyone, which really isn't a good effective use of time. What you want to do is make sure that you make adjustments to the business. And if there's an issue that's really burning and you have everyone in the room, try to solve that in the meeting as well. And of course, weekly one-on-ones where you're working with your direct reports. Many people have this as well. This is where you're helping any folks that get stuck or want to transfer some information or help them to learn a new skill maybe. And then the daily huddle, which is a quick catch-up. It's 10 to 15 minutes. It's 60 to 90 seconds per person in the meeting. Some companies do the entire organization every day. Some do department by department. It's sort of up to you and what you want to do. But typically, you're just answering a few simple questions about what am I trying to accomplish today, how am I measuring, and where am I stuck? And maybe someone else can help them. So that's sort of a breakdown of the meetings at a high level as well. And so I'm not going to spend too much time on these 2 slides because I think I went into a lot of depth already. But you can see the weekly meeting and the one-on-ones, again, as we review your quarterly priorities at each meeting. There's some collective intelligence to solve any issues or bottlenecks, so you're moving the company forward, or you're helping one of the team members move forward. You're making sure you're taking care of anything that gets stuck. So if you're not achieving objectives, you want to bring that up. You're also sharing customer and employee feedback, and this is really important, is that many executives they lose touch over time with their customers, which is a mistake. You really should keep in touch with the customers. I recommend my executives teams that I work with keep in touch with 1 or 2 customers a week. and you just have a quick conversation. I give them a set of questions to talk with if they're not sure what to talk about. And the same thing with employee feedback. I recommend that everyone on the executive team talks to 1 or 2 employees, and usually start, stop, and keep is the great example of doing that. So what should we start doing that we're not doing? What should we stop doing that we are doing? And what should we keep doing that's really working? And that should be a 30 to 60 minute one as well. And then the monthly management meeting, again, frontline, middle, and senior managers, again, reviewing your OKRs and priorities. As you can see, this is a pattern. You want to continue to make sure your priorities are moving forward. And then in many cases, you want to collaborate on a key strategic issue. What is something that's important? Maybe there's a big agreement that hasn't been signed yet with a partner or a large customer, and there are some things that get stuck. I recommend invite everyone into the room that needs to be involved in that, be it the lawyers, the contract people, the salespeople, whoever else needs to be involved. Solve it in the meeting. Great use of time in a monthly management meeting to do something like that. All right, for my last slide, I think the analogy between building a business and climbing a mountain, or a challenging and tall mountain, is really appropriate. In order to reach the summit, you have to come up with a well thought out strategy to get you from the bottom to the top. You need to have the right people with you to execute that plan to get you from each step of the way. As you can see, next quarter, 12 months, 2 to 5 years, and 10 years in the case of, bottom of the mountain to just below the summit, to the summit itself. And again, this ties back to people, strategy, execution, and cash, right? Have the right people, a well thought out strategy. You have to have good execution. Of course, you need to fund the expedition, so you need to have the cash to do that. Sometimes when climbing a difficult mountain, you start towards your next destination and hit unexpected things. And to stay with the analogy, weather, equipment issues, people issues, injury or sickness from someone, which means in some cases you have to stop and readjust. Sometimes you have to go backwards in order to move forward again. However, if you are clear on where you're going and you follow the plan with some inevitable adjustments along the way, you will more often than not reach the top. In many cases, you'll get there faster than expected, and for a time, will likely be the only one enjoying the satisfaction of a spectacular view and a sense of accomplishment. So I wish you all the best on a journey building a great organization and business. And with that, I'll hand off to Zorian so we can go into more depth on OKRs. So thank you for your time and attention.
All right, Bill, thank you so much. That was great. And everyone, by the way, at the end here, we will offer you something special from Bill before the webinar is over. And you'll see contact information, so stay tuned. We'll call it holiday gifts. And in the meantime, we're going to talk about objectives and key results, OKRs. Basically, from what Bill was discussing, it's your quarterly or annual priorities. If you want to achieve your strategy, if you want to grow, you got to set objectives. That's what OKRs are. Really, they're just objectives. And you can't have any kind of strategy without having clear objectives that are cascaded throughout your teams, your executives, your managers, and your even junior employees. So there's a well-known Harvard statistic, actually promulgated by Professors Kaplan and Norton, who invented the balanced scorecard. And they did this study, and it turns out that 95% of employees at any given company, on average, do not fully understand the company's strategy or goals or what's expected of them, these employees, to achieve the top level corporate objectives, either quarterly or annual or even longer term. That's pretty shocking, right? How can it be? Well, it turns out that the 5% who do know are just the executive team. You really want the rest of your company to understand it, to understand your strategy, to understand their objectives and how to help the company achieve its primary objectives. So OKRs really are just objectives, but they were made extremely popular in the past couple of years, and I'll talk more about that on the next slide. But OKRs are just there to align everyone at your company to focus their collective effort on what really matters, right, to you, the corporate founder, CEO, chief operating officer, which is majority of the folks here in the webinar, or to the company at large, so that the company's top corporate objectives are ultimately achieved every quarter and every year. And this is the slide where I really talk about that 500,000 people were watching this video that Google did a couple of years ago. So Google did this 82-minute video. Who the heck has time to watch about an hour and a half about how Google sets objectives internally, measures them, and makes everyone align behind Google's top corporate objectives? But apparently, 500,000 executives, general managers, mid level managers, and frontline managers have found time to watch about an hour and a half of this, take notes, and become incredibly enthused and ultimately embrace the OKR, objectives and key results methodology. It's hugely popular. But interestingly, there are a lot of folks out there who've been doing objective setting or goal setting at their companies for a while. There were very many methodologies out there. The most popular one is really MBOs by Peter Drucker, Management by Objectives. The truth is, OKRs and MBOs are pretty much one and the same. But Google basically said, look, we're going to take MBOs and modernize them by making them um, a lot of companies used to set them just annually, and Google said quarterly. It has to be done quarterly, and you must check in once a week, 12 times per quarter, right? Just 5 minutes per week, update your OKRs, let your manager and everyone else know where you stand, and that's the point of transparency at the bottom. And part of this transparency is showing how the objectives are all aligned or cross-aligned throughout the company. With MBOs, there was less emphasis, not that you couldn't do it with MBOs, but there was less emphasis on this very regular check-in, the fact that they should be aligned, not just sort of known between a manager and an employee, and transparent to everyone to see what you're working on. Um, and there are a ton of benefits why great organizations use OKRs, but it primarily, really any objectives at all are about clear and accurate communication of what it is that must be accomplished, the focus, connecting people to what is relevant. And ultimately, the last point is really establishing measurable progress indicators throughout the organization, right? So that progress is not just subjective, but actually it's objective and measurable. Ton of companies use objectives and key results, all of these here and all of these here. It's no surprise there are thousands and thousands of companies every year that come out and they say they use OKRs internally, either throughout the entire company or just by specific managers with their teams. So I'll give you a couple of pointers, and I'm going to run really quickly because we have 16 minutes left. But first of all, break down your strategy. So Bill talked about strategy. Break it down into your objectives. There's a famous story that Peter Drucker wrote about in the Practice of Management about the three stonecutters, and basically this traveler comes through town and he sees three stonecutters, and he has the first one. What is it that you're doing? And the guy looks at him and goes, "What are you, crazy? I'm just cutting stone. Can't you see?" He came up to the second person and the second stonecutter and said, "What is it that you're doing?" And that stonecutter said, "Listen, I'm just making a living." Then he comes up to the third stonecutter and asks, "What are you doing?" And the guy says, "I'm building a beautiful cathedral." There's a huge difference between being in the weeds and actually understanding the vision, ultimately what it is that you're trying to achieve. And that is the taking these objectives and connecting them to your top corporate priorities and to your strategy so that everyone at your company clearly sees that connection and they see what they're working on, how that connects to making progress for what is the most important to the company. Okay, so translate your business strategy into a few clear and focused OKR goals, and this will make all the difference. Secondly, understand the definitions with OKRs. Look, I tell everyone OKRs are simply just objectives. That's all they are. But in the OKR methodology, because Google has made them and Intel also made them slightly varied from the MBOs and the other objectives. The O is sort of a misnomer, if you ask me. It's actually your strategic priority, strategic theme, strategic initiative. It's the name, the headline. It's not quantitative. It's just the label that tells everyone what's the big theme, the big priority we're trying to accomplish. It is the key results that have the measurement and the quantification. In fact, if you think of MBOs, increase our revenue to 100 million. That's what a key result is the result you're trying to achieve in the end, and it falls under the big strategic theme, which is referred to as the objective or the objective name. So you typically put it in this way: we want to, and then you put your objective, the headline, as measured by this set of key results, and then key result 1, 2, and 3 to 5. Let's talk about cascading and aligning. So really, and this actually is a screenshot out of our product, and I didn't talk much about our company. It's Atiim software with two eyes. The two eyes actually, people ask, what the heck is all this two eyes? What's that all about? It's for including individuals, right? That's what the two eyes stand for, but it's Atiim. And basically, this is an ability to visualize objectives, but it's not an org chart. It's an objective alignment chart showing how different objectives align under each other. And every time progress is made on any of the objectives or OKRs throughout the organization, they ladder up to the objectives above them, which ladder up further to the objectives above them, all the way up to one of the one, two, or three, or five top corporate objectives. So everything works together to move the needle on the objectives to which they align. And that's how you do that. You can also cascade a bigger objective down to different departments like sales, marketing, or product, or support. And then each of the general managers or team leads of those departments, business units, or groups or teams can further cascade those objectives down and allocate objectives to each team member if they want to. It's pretty amazing what you can do in software, of course, in terms of maintaining and measuring these objectives. Let's talk about planning and timeline for setting objectives for you to achieve your quarterly and then annual priorities. Focus is really critical. So Andy Grove, who wrote about the way Intel did their MBOs, which is basically what OKRs are today, what Google refers to as OKRs, in his book High Output Management, he said we must realize and act on the realization that if we try to focus on everything, we focus on nothing. And that's the big problem. So you need only very few OKRs or objectives per department, per team. Corporate objectives have one, two, or three, maybe five. Every department, business unit, 1 to 5, 3 to 5 is the magic number. Typically, you're not going to have an average more than three. And there are three keys to success with setting objectives throughout your company. First of all, discretion. Second of all, common sense, and common sense is not so common. So keep in mind you have to think about that, and then walk before you run. We have a lot of customers globally, and we see that a lot of times when people stumble, it's because they're trying to set objectives for everyone quickly, like immediately. But it cascades, and you can take time, and you can just set them up initially for the executive team, where each executive owns objectives on behalf of their business unit or department, and then a quarter later you can hand out objectives to team leads and junior employees, but don't try to do everything at once. So there's one critical must do, and as Andy Grove actually talked about it, the key is to set and check on your OKRs frequently. Don't do it once a year, because that's set and forget. By the time the year is over, you forget about what it is you were trying to focus on in the first place. This is why OKRs are a quarterly methodology, and they really stress the fact that it should be done quarterly, but checked in weekly. So quarterly OKR, you have weekly check-ins. That's 12 times per quarter. Just few, like 3 to 5 minutes on a check-in. You update where you are. You communicate your bottleneck or where you're stuck to your manager. Our product actually enables that very easily, but very important to do that frequently. There's actually research from the American Psychological Association in terms of setting objectives, and the more frequently you do them, the more likely you are to achieve them. That's really what it comes down to. Deloitte also said that organizations that do goal setting and set objectives and check in on them more frequently than others are far more likely to be in the top quartile of their business performance. In fact, if you do it, people who do it once a year are far less likely to be in the top quartile, and those who are doing it even monthly are 3.5 times more, and then weekly it's even more than that. So do it frequently. And I'm not even going to go through this list of benefits. We have 9 minutes left of weekly check-ins, but high level, there's a ton of benefits, including identifying obstacles, as Bill was saying earlier, in reference to KPIs. Sort of leading indicators and OKRs are pretty much, ability to track towards your goal. You identify obstacles every week, right? Instead of waiting a full quarter to look back and say, oh, geez, why did we miss this goal, right? You address changes and course correct right along the way. You can even recognize good performance in the objectives in real time. And, this recognition and engaging employees is very, very critical. If a CEO or an executive or a manager were to run a high performance organization. Start every meeting with goals. Why do a lot of meetings, Bill mentioned briefly meetings that are boring and that nobody likes them. Why is it that most meetings, whether it's one-on-one meetings between a manager and a direct report, or team meetings, group meetings, why don't they include discussion about the objectives we're trying to achieve this quarter and where we stand? That's ridiculous, right? Every meeting should start, how's the progress in the top goals? Any problem areas where we're stuck? Anything at risk? Any cross-functional alignment where we're working with other teams, marketing and aligned to sales in the B2B environment? What is our goal for leads or lead generation or qualified leads for the sales team, and where we stand on that? Every meeting should be about that. Finally, goals are about results, not activities. Okay, don't mistake activity with results. Lou Gerstner, right? So a task or activity is what you do. A goal is the desired outcome, a future state. That's why key results have the word results, right? Is the key result you're trying to achieve in the end. It is measurable and a lot of times even quantified. I'm not going to go into definition, discernment on measurable versus quantified. Maybe we'll have a more advanced webinar since we have also little time left. But you're trying to achieve a measurable and hopefully quantified specific result at the end of the quarter. It's not a bunch of projects or to-dos. So when we talk to a lot of our prospective customers, when they use some kind of a to-do list or tools out there that are to keep track of tasks or projects, goal setting has nothing to do with those. It's not about tasks. It's not about projects. All the tasks and projects are done in order for you to ultimately achieve your measurable 3 to 5 goals at the end of the quarter. We are all about goals, not projects, not activities, not tasks. And basically goals are also made to remove and eliminate the unfortunate micromanagement that happens at a lot of organizations, so that nobody's checking on your activities every day or every week and standing up, over your shoulder, but actually measuring progress towards goals, and has discussions about goal attainment, not what tasks or activities are, or need to be done, because that is micromanagement. So I flew right through this, and I'm glad I got to this point. So a couple of holiday gifts for webinar attendees. And by the way, I realized that we went fairly quickly, and we had some technical challenges in the beginning of the webinar, so we tried to rush through. There will be a lot of these webinars over the course of Q1, so keep in mind we're going to go deep dives into objectives and key results, and webinars on doing actual OKR examples and how to wordsmith them effectively. But the first holiday gift is from Bill. Bill is all in the holiday spirit. He's actually offering 90-minute strategic plan consultation. If you're here in Massachusetts or New England area, it can be actually an in-person visit. It's a free gift. Bill, tell us like really briefly about what it is that you're offering here, and it can also be a phone call, right?
Right. Yeah. So what I find is when I work with folks, it's good to kind of get a baseline of where the business is. So I typically walk through the 10 Rockefeller habits that's part of the Gazelles organization, which supposedly are what John D. Rockefeller used to help run Standard Oil, which would still be, I think, the third largest company in the world today, if you recombine everything back together. And it's a great way to get to know me and my process and my personality, and then also really come away with some value that you can bring back to your company, and pick one or two of them to work on after I leave.
Yeah, and Bill is great. I've gotten to know Bill a little bit over the past few months. Really enjoyed our conversations and everything Bill talked about during this webinar in the beginning. If you have any questions on your strategy, on execution, and Bill does this audit, it's fantastic. I urge really everyone on this webinar to take advantage of this. It's 90 minutes. It's extremely valuable. It can have a huge impact on your growth next year, and it's free. I would definitely take this offer. It's not every day you get that. From
And I
us,
will add
yeah.
one more thing, Zorian, is there's no selling. It's an actual exercise. So I'm not going to sit there and give you a pitch for 90 minutes. It's all about you and trying to get you some value.
And that's awesome. Yeah, exactly. I say that a lot with ourselves. Like when we do webinars, it's primarily educational too. It's not meant to like sell our product or whatnot. With, of course we try to advertise and promote, but At the end of the day, it's all about adding value first and foremost. From us, there's an OKR goals ebook on our website. Go to atiim.com and go to resources. We offer a bunch of ebooks that hopefully you'll find helpful, and of course, you can email us as well. There's one quick announcement. So, actually, if you talked to, Bill talked about the one-page strategic plan earlier in this webinar. Um, which you can get in a worksheet or PDF from Bill directly if you email Bill. But also in our product, we're launching, we've been working on this recently. It's basically an ability to input the key components of your strategy, your mission and core purpose, your BHAG that Bill referred to earlier, a big, hairy, audacious goal, your vision, your core values and beliefs, right? And actually, that's going to be right in our product. We can demo it to you if you'd like. It's really great. Your core focus, your marketing strategy, your issues and risks as well. And actually, the one thing over here, this third screen that you see is really cool. As part of the feedback that you can get within our product from a manager to employee or even peer-to-peer, people can actually, you see where it says which core value of our company does this person exemplify. It's really cool. So the core values you put on your strategy screen, you can actually give kudos and high fives, if you will. Not really, but it's kind of like exemplifying your core strategy as part of the feedback to the person who exemplifies them. So that really ties that together. It's not just something just written, penciled in on a piece of paper that nobody ever looks at again. It's actually interactive, and people can receive that feedback that they exemplify your corporate values, which makes people focus on them, know them, and of course, the rest of the product is all about managing OKRs, alignment, understanding what goals are at risk, etc. So if you're interested in any of that, of course, email us, hello@atiim.com. We'd be happy to sign up for a demo on our website. But, other than that, please contact Bill. He's fantastic on strategy. And with that, I think, Bill, we want to wish everyone a happy holiday season. And thank you all for your time today. Hopefully this was helpful.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for your time.